sometimes been called a protege of George Bush. His name got mentioned. He got a bit into the Iran-Contra affair. That's when he left the CIA and then was brought into the White House National Security Council operation.
And, of course, there was the most recent publicity surrounding Mr. Gates was a hardline speech denigrating Mr. Gorbachev's chances for success over in the Soviet Union, a speech that was quashed by Mr. Baker, who at the same point was putting out a far more positive pro-Gorbachev line. But in any event, in this White House, he is the Deputy National Security Advisor and functions in the Situation Room in events like this.
Wyatt Andrews covering the White House tonight as part of our CBS News Live coverage of the U.S. military attack in Panama. U.S. military forces on the move with ground troops, tanks, armored personnel carriers, air cover, including helicopters. There have been reports of what is called a cannon fire, although General Werner, our consultant here, pointed out that cannon fire is frequently confused with rocket fire. One of the eyewitnesses said, well, he thought he heard bazookas. Of course, modern military operations, even the Panamanian Defense Forces rarely use bazookas anymore, and the presumption was that he meant that he heard rocket fire in the background. Summing up what we know and what we don't know, U.S. Armed Forces have launched a midnight Eastern U.S. time invasion of Panama. It is aimed, according to the official White House announcement, at unseating and capturing General Manuel Noriega. There are indications that the operation has larger goals than that, unspecified, and perhaps to be made clear as time goes along. The operation in full, it is officially said, started at approximately 1 a.m. Eastern USA time. Reporters said they saw truckloads of U.S. troops moving through the streets toward the headquarters of Noriega's Panamanian Defense Forces. Even well before that, the area around the headquarters was last reported to be in flames. Mortar and small arms fire heard there, along with some cannon and or rocket fire. U.S. planes and helicopters are flying air cover. There is some fighting at least 20 miles north of Panama City. U.S. forces said to be on the attack there. At the base operation of one of Manuel Noriega's elite forces. This comes after a major troop buildup over the last 3 days at U.S. bases in Panama and some maneuvering by Noriega's own troops within the country to get themselves dispersed for possible house-to-house fighting if necessary. A White House spokesman early today said that the operation was undertaken to protect American lives and American interests under the Panama Canal Treaty and with the ultimate aim of capturing Manuel Noriega to bring him to the United States for prosecution on drug charges. The spokesman also said that the purpose is to install the duly elected government of Panama, chosen in elections that were annulled brutally by Noriega in the streets of Panama City. The White House says that that government now has been sworn in. That government, which the United States and President Bush believes was duly elected, that government has now been sworn in and is recognized by the United States as the government of Panama. There's been no word yet on casualties, and they may be a while in coming. CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin says among the U.S. forces is the U.S. Army's Delta Force, its mission presumably to capture or possibly to kill Noriega. Underscore that word possibly. Marlin Fitzwater seemed to make it clear tonight that the number one objective was to capture Noriega alive if possible. President Bush ordered the operation, and the president is said to be monitoring it from the White House Oval Office, along with his chief of staff, the chief of White House staff, John Sununu, and National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. Now, those are the details as we know them up to this time. Reminding you that Marlin Fitzwater said at the White House that there will be a Defense Department briefing on the operational details of what's going on in Panama. Fitzwater gave no operational details himself at all, but he said that there would be a Pentagon briefing, but he indicated that it might be a while. So our situation is, while the fighting is underway in the darkness of Panama, a lot of gunfire reported. So far, there have been no confirmed reports of gunfire from the air, planes and helicopters up and flying over the city and in and around Panama City, yes, but actual gunfire or bombing for the air, not yet confirmed. All of the fighting that we know of so far has been on the ground. Juan VASQUEZ is in Panama City. Not long ago, he asked us not to come to him because his situation in a hotel there has been dangerous for at least the last 3.5 or 4 hours, and he reached a point not long ago where he said, look, I can't talk at the moment. Now he's up again, and let's see. Juan, if you're able to talk, please bring us up to date.
Dan, the radio is still calling on people to resist what they are calling the Yankee invasion. They're still saying the invasion is underway, calling on people to come out on the streets to resist what they call the Yankee aggressors. The hotel here where I am is still sort of occupied. When you called earlier, there were people we thought very close to our room, so we thought it was best not to talk at that time. About half an hour ago, we heard two very loud explosions in the vicinity, in the general area of the hotel, not necessarily close by. It sounded to me like rocket fire, but we can't tell for sure. We have also heard sporadic automatic weapons fire. That sounds a little bit more distant from the hotel. As far as we can tell, nothing has changed. The invasion, or what appears to be an invasion, is still on. The radio is still urging people to go out into the streets, but we have no, they are not giving specifics of troop movements of any kind. They are not giving specifics of where any fighting is taking place. They are not saying what's going on.
Juan VASQUEZ in Panama City. CBS News producer Andy Triay is in Bogota, Colombia. He's been monitoring what Colombian radio is saying about the fighting in Panama, keeping in mind that Colombia's position as one of the neighbors, one of the southern neighbors of Panama. Andy, what is Colombian radio saying about this situation?
Dan, Colombian radio, one of the private networks, a short while ago ran an interview with Rigoberto Paredes, who is one of Noriega's most vocal supporters in Panama. As Juan just reported, Paredes asked for the Dignity battalions to take to the streets. Those are the battalions that Noriega has trained, and their the biggest thing they've done is the beating up of the presidential candidates after the election. He vowed that the Noriega regime would never surrender, and this is a moment of truth. He claimed the United States is wanting to make Panama a colony, and Guillermo Endara, who was sworn in as president, according to the United States, is a traitor. Paredes sounded excited and sounded very confused as to what was going on. The Colombian radio has also talked to eyewitnesses who say U.S. jets have bombed the quartel of Manuel Noriega, and there are flames coming from that quartel. They quoted two separate eyewitnesses saying that.
Andy, there have been increasing reports that the sky over Panama City is bright with the light of gunfire, and a fire appeared to have started near the headquarters of Noriega's defense forces. Now, we keep emphasizing that so far as we've been able to determine, no one has established Noriega's whereabouts. Panama is a small country. It's true. Panama City is not an overwhelmingly large city. That's true. But there are a lot of places to hide in Panama. We simply have to see whether Noriega, as Marlin Fitzwater outlined as one of the primary missions of this U.S. attack, is actually captured. David Martin is standing by at the Pentagon, has been making his calls around. David, any additional information on what U.S. military units are involved in this fighting?
Well, Dan, you mentioned a little while ago that there had been a report of fighting about 20 miles outside of Panama City, near a place where a unit called Battalion 2000 is located. Battalion 2000 is a Panamanian Defense Force unit, which was the unit which came to Noriega's rescue in that abortive October coup in which the U.S. was, as you said, fairly or unfairly criticized for not intervening more strongly on the side of those who were trying to overthrow Noriega. They were the ones who left their barracks and came and rescued Noriega at the defense headquarters. Now, the reports of fighting there sound as if the U.S. forces have got that place surrounded or are in some way attempting to seal it off using helicopters, perhaps helicopter gunships, and probably troops on the ground.
David, when we had General Werner, our consultant, up a while ago, he indicated that when all is said and done, he believes that the extent of the fighting will prove to be greater than we now have been able to confirm and establish. Have you seen or heard anything at the Pentagon that would lead you to conclude something different?
No, and it's been my experience in every one of these operations over the past 5, 6, 7 years that when it's all over, the fighting is always much, much more than was originally reported. There are always actions going on the side that you don't know about, support actions that weren't important enough to report at the time. actions that were kept secret for one reason or another. For instance, it will be a long time, I think, before we know the full story of what went on in trying to locate Noriega and in actually capture him, if in fact that does happen.
David, it's still unclear to me. Do you have any indication of why President Bush and his military advisors would choose this moment, just before Christmas, holidays approaching? Why right now?
Well, events. This option of basically overthrowing Noriega and installing a government friendly to the United States has been around for months. But what happened was that last Friday we had that declaration of war by Panama. That wasn't taken very seriously at first, just more rhetoric from down south. But then over the weekend, when we had these incidents, the one off-duty Marine killed, the Navy lieutenant and his wife harassed and actually beaten up, and some other incidents, that's what really set this in train. And I think once the president made the decision, as Marlin Fitzwater said on Sunday, from then on, it was just a question of how quickly the troops could be moved into position. If they could have done it yesterday, they would have done it yesterday. If it had taken another day to get ready, they would have waited the other day. Once the decision was made on Sunday, it's all been just a matter of getting the pieces into place and going.
David, we don't, as the fighting continues in Panama City and we await the casualties reports that will be inevitable and details of the operations, we can't get too deeply into the background and history. But we do know that General Noriega for a long time was a kind of darling of the U.S. government, and that went through Republican and Democratic administrations. Fair to say that perhaps he was embraced a little greater in the, at least early and mid-years of the Reagan-Bush administration. Noriega was actually on the payroll of the Central Intelligence Agency. You have a lot of experience covering not only military affairs, but intelligence affairs. How did we get in and so deeply and involved with such a drug thug as this?
Well, in the intelligence business, you take your information where you can get it. And Noriega, before he became the head of the country, was the head of their intelligence service. And so he had a good handle on what was going on inside his country. And we made a deal with the devil. And we probably got some information out of that. Obviously, it's something that's come back to haunt the U.S., but that's something that frequently happens, going all the way back to using some of the Nazi war criminals after World War II. You necessarily deal with unsavory characters when you're in the intelligence business. I think that's probably how we got hooked up with Noriega, although I think if people had been able to see exactly what Noriega would become, then probably at the time they wouldn't have made the decision to take him on as a paid agent, which is what he was.
David, if I may, let's go to, briefly at least, to General Werner, Frederick Werner, who's recently retired and had the Southern Command. General, what about how we got in with a Noriega, what our involvement actually was? You've met Noriega, I take it, know him, know that background. Give us some perspective and context here.
Yes, General Noriega's rise to power within the Panamanian Defense Forces was based when he was commanding in a northern region in this city of David. And the then dictator of Panama, Omar Torrijos, left country momentarily, and during his absence there was a coup trying to remove Omar Torrijos from power. He returned, stopped en route in David. Noriega joined up with him and with his troops and supported the reestablishment of Omar Torrijos's reign. It was this support to Torrijos that brought Noriega rapidly to the forefront, perhaps long before the natural progression would have otherwise brought Noriega. And then he served for 12 years as senior intelligence officer before becoming the commander-in-chief of the Panamanian Defense Forces. Noriega was never a favorite of the United States, but as has just been discussed, he was the chief of intelligence, and in this activity, you sometimes become involved with unsavory characters. In fact, I can well remember over the past decade playing what if, the worst possible scenario, and it was always that Noriega should come to power.
General, stick with us here. For those who have joined us late or perhaps joined us in progress, this is CBS News live coverage of the U.S. combat operation, the U.S. attack in Panama, an effort to capture, if possible, alive General Manuel Noriega, and to install what the United States government now recognizes as the official government of Panama, what President Bush and the U.S. government considers to be the freely elected government of Panama, to replace Noriega. Fighting going on and has been going on in and around Panama City for coming up soon at least 2 hours, and in some cases perhaps as much as 3. General Werner, if we can get back to you for just a moment, you have met Noriega. From time to time, people have said Noriega, whatever you think of him, is the kind of man who would never be taken alive. Is that your personal assessment?
Not necessarily. Noriega enjoys life very much and probably has numerous escape routes planned and refuge sites well prepared for him. However, he will not bluff, as we have learned over the course of the past 3 years. But should it come down to a choice between death or escaping to enjoy his ill-gotten gains, he will certainly try, in the last instance, to get out of Panama alive.
General, what do we know about Manuel Noriega's connections with Fidel Castro in Cuba? Incredibly, it's the only word you can use, while he was serving as the interest of U.S. intelligence, we know that he also had an involvement with Fidel Castro. What light can you shed on that?
Yes, he had a very good working relationship with Fidel. In fact, the man that denounced him and started this current crisis on the 7th of June 1987 was his personal emissary, Roberto Diaz Herrera. Noriega, as he does in so many other situations, played both ends. He played the United States and he played Cuba. It was no secret to neither the United States nor to Cuba, but it was convenient for both of us.
General, again, bring us up to date. You've been following it as best you can, the reports of the fighting, things we should be looking for as time goes along as indicators of how well or how badly it's going.
The most critical element in the operation now is the capture of General Noriega. In military operations, unlike sports, you don't get any points for trying. You only get credit for succeeding. And the measure of success in this operation, no matter what other objectives are attained, will be whether or not Noriega is removed from power. So we should keep our eyes on that single objective more than anything else.
Not suggesting that he can, but if it turns out that Noriega slips the noose, this massive U.S. force designed first and foremost to get him, if he slips that noose, how could he do that, or is it possible?
Yes, it would be possible because when one tries to encircle every possible location where Noriega would be, you soon run out of troops in that capacity. So he could have, seeing the buildup of American forces, he could have taken refuge in some prepared hiding site, waiting now to see how it goes. And if it goes badly for him, escape by sea or by small aircraft landing on any number of small airstrips throughout Panama.
This elite unit, so described, Elite Unit 2000, at the Panamanian Defense Force base some 20 miles outside Panama City. How good a fighting force is this outfit?
It is a very good battalion size force, very capable at the tactical level of operations. That is, at platoon and company level operations, soldiers operating under the command of junior officers. Once you get beyond that level, however, and go beyond battalion level, integrating the complexities of combat operations, communications, intelligence, counterintelligence, direct fire, indirect fire, all these force multipliers, then the battalion's capability is very limited. Furthermore, there is no other battalion that can measure up to the standards of the Battalion 2000.
General, on the basis of what you've seen, and I know how difficult it is to make an assessment on this small of information, did this get off to a good start? On what little information we have, did it seem to be going as the plan would be, as you knew it when you were in command there?
I do not comment, of course, on existing plans. And frankly, the information is much too sketchy to see if it is proceeding according to plan or if it's being done on the hip shot right now.
Understand, and I certainly understand and respect you not wanting the plans. If you were in command, my guess is, and I'm only guessing, that you've said a little prayer saying, thank God I'm not at the moment, but if you were in command, what would be your biggest worry as the American commander?
The primary mission, of course, is to accomplish the assignment given to you at the absolute minimum cost to your own troops, and at the same time limiting to the extent possible the damage to innocent civilians.
And what units would have been spearheading this attack, General? We have so many units down there.
I do not know what units were deployed to Panama to reinforce the existing units. The primary unit permanently stationed in Panama is the 193rd Infantry Brigade.
Thank you, General Werner. And of course, we'll be coming back to you as time goes along. Right now, let's go back to the videotape of the White House briefing. After his opening statement, presidential spokesman Marlin Fitzwater answered questions about the Panama operation, not many about the military details. He declined to give out any details on the military aspects, in fact. But these were some of the questions and some of Marlin Fitzwater's answers at the White House a short while ago.
This operation began at 1 o'clock. The situation on the ground is such that we are not at liberty at this point to comment on any of the details of the military undertaking. The operation is ongoing. We don't know how long it will take, but that is our ultimate objective. It has not happened at this time.
Marlin, on what legal basis was this operation undertaken?
The legal basis was, first of all, the President's responsibility and duty to protect the lives of American citizens. We have laid out in the past the number of threats to American citizens and to U.S. servicemen. There have been literally hundreds of cases of harassment, of abuse, and of situations that have caused us to believe very greatly that there is a threat to American citizens, there is a threat to our rights under the Canal Treaty, and the President has acted on that basis.
Is the President acting under intelligence reports that this operation has a guarantee or certainty of success?
The certainty of an undertaking like this is something that we obviously have confidence in. We would not undertake a military action that we did not believe was well planned and had a high degree and high chance of success.
U.S. military forces on the attack in Panama, trying, among other things, to capture General Manuel Noriega. Now, this situation obviously will be developing throughout the night and probably well into tomorrow morning. CBS News will be following it, of course, as we have been throughout the early stages, and now what the U.S. military hopes will be at least the middle stages of this operation. We'll go quickly now to CBS News White House correspondent Wyatt Andrews at the White House for quickly, Wyatt, what can we expect next out of the White House?
Dan, that's going to depend literally on how well or poorly things go. We are told that the President at last word, and that was just a few minutes ago, is still in the Oval Office tracking events in Panama, getting briefings from his aides. So I leave it to you and our viewers to decide that if the president is not in bed yet, there are still things to be decided and still matters of great concern going on.
And joining us now is CBS News correspondent Harry Smith, who will be staying with the story throughout the night and, of course, will help spearhead our coverage on the CBS Morning News and on CBS This Morning. Harry, you've been reading the wires and trying to sort of stand back and take a look. Where are the holes? What do we have?
Key in all of this, I think, Dan, is where is Manuel Noriega? I think already yesterday, as we saw the forces heading down into Panama, that was one of the big question marks, is what his location was. Certainly what we haven't found out thus far is whether or not the United States troops, and one must assume, I think, that they had a very good idea where he was if they were going to launch an operation like this, whether or not they've been able to isolate him and, in fact, pinpoint where he is and extricate him as the mission has been outlined by Marlin Fitzwater.
Interesting that reaction thus far has been, first of all, we're talking about United States domestic reaction. There's been very little of it from anyone in Congress or elsewhere in politics, and what there's been so far has been very muted. In this situation, different from some others, so far, that old adage of, listen, our arguments stop at the water's edge. Whether you agree with the president's decision or not, see it through, see what happens, and then let's debate it, has held here in the early hours.
It seems to me, though, that as an election that was closely watched by Americans, and we had all kinds of folks down there when that election took place, that this was an election that was clearly that went against Noriega, and he physically, as a well-known thug, went in there and took it back. So I think all of the people who have observed over all that time and saw the ruthlessness with he regained power there after this so-called free election took place, I think it's going to be hard to find people who are going to say this wasn't such a good idea to go in and try and get him out of there.
Well, fair to say that Noriega was never very popular here, and certainly since that. But also interesting, Harry, as we've gone along here, we haven't heard anything out of Panama's neighbors. But the thought runs strong that the immediate neighbors, and that would include Colombia and Venezuela, as well as Honduras, Guatemala, that in terms, with the exception of Nicaragua and the opposition in El Salvador, you'd expect to hear a great round of applause if this works.
I think it's if this works, but there's also been some sentiment from that area of the world, of course, over a long period of time, that they want to be in charge of their own affairs. So it'll be interesting to see as the cards fall out, as the evening progresses or the morning progresses, as the case may be, Dan, who ends up siding on what side.
And Mexico has a long-standing opposition to U.S. military intervention, anybody's military intervention. It'll be key to see as this thing develops what the official Mexican reaction, government reaction is, and then what the general man in the street, peasant out in the countryside reaction in Mexico will be. Right now, let's swing to David Martin, who's at the Pentagon. David, is there any idea when we may begin to hear some of the operational military details? We're fairly deep into this now, and they not only have been scarce, they've been non-existent in terms of official confirmation of what is going on with U.S. military forces.
Well, I think that's because of the confusion that reigns whenever you have military action, and particularly when you have military action in the dead of night. At the moment, there are conflicting reports on what has happened to Noriega, where he is. So one of the primary objectives of the operation is still very much up in the air. Nobody is quite sure what his status is. Some of the Panamanian Defense Force units apparently have thrown down their arms and have decided not to fight. Others are fighting on. So there is some resistance being put up by these PDF units. And finally, there is at least a report, and you have to remember that in these situations, the actual confirmation may be hours away yet, but there is at least a report that the U.S. Embassy in Panama has taken some sort of fire. Now, I don't know if that fire was directed by elements of the Panamanian Defense Forces. I don't know if they were stray rounds, but it is a report that some some rounds have hit the embassy compound in Panama City.
David, of course, one would expect some precautions to have been taken in advance with U.S. citizens, but there's a limit to how many precautions can be taken.
Well, that's right. And a lot of Americans have been brought home really within the past month. To get a lot of the military families out, the Pentagon changed the tour of duty down there in such a way that whereas about 2 months ago there were something like 14,000 military dependents in Panama, today there are something like 6,000. And of course, as we've heard earlier, a condition echo has been declared there, which means that everybody stay in their houses, keep their heads down.
David, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, the former distinguished congressman from Wyoming, who is President Bush's defense secretary, is he still at the White House in the Situation Room? Is he back at the Pentagon? Where is he?
Dan, my understanding is that he has been here at the Pentagon all night. When I would walk by the office earlier in the evening, you would occasionally see someone rushing in or out. I think he tried to catch a few hours sleep around, say, between 9 and 11 o'clock. But I think he's been here in the Crisis Management Center here at the Pentagon for the entire time, on the phone to Panama, along with General Colin Powell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Now, General Colin Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, is he in operational control of the military arm in Washington? It's always somewhat confusing what the chain of command is.
It is, and I'm a little hesitant to take this on with General Werner listening, but the way it is supposed to work is that the chain of command goes from the President to the Secretary of Defense, through the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to the commander in the field, in this case the commander in the field being General Max Thurman, the commander of forces at the U.S. Southern Command in Panama.
David, there was this phone line, at least one direct phone line to the general in charge in Panama. Who is on the Washington end of that phone line?
Well, I imagine it changes from time to time. Now, this is really just speculation on my part. I don't know this, but I am sure at one point Secretary Cheney would ask to talk to General Thurman. General Powell would want to talk to General Thurman down in Panama. At other times, you might have lower-ranking officers sort of keeping the line open and then handing it over to Secretary Cheney or General Powell if a report of particular interest came along.
When we finally get the first of the Pentagon briefings on what we hope will be plural briefings as time goes along on what's happening militarily, what kinds of things, what kind of information can we expect to get, David?
Well, I think that's probably pretty much up in the air right now, because there's always a battle between how much you want to reveal about your operations. But I would think at a minimum we would be able to find out the size of the force involved here, certainly the casualties, both killed if there have been any, and wounded. I should say that there are no reliable reports of casualties on either side yet, but that is certainly something we ought to be able to find out with great specificity as time goes on.
David, when the planning for this kind of operation was underway, and it's been underway for a long time, were there any estimates on how long it would be expected to take?
I'm sure there were, but I don't know what they are. I mean, one of the principles of military planning is when do I go in, and what does it take for me to get out? In other words, what's the end point of this? And if you go back to some of our more unpopular military engagements, Vietnam in particular, the problem with Vietnam is we never could figure out what the end point is. How do we declare victory and get out? Here, I'm sure they set, and Marlin Fitzwater outlined them, very specific goals to be achieved. Apprehend Noriega, protect the lives of Americans, set up this democratically elected government. Once that's accomplished, the U.S. troops come home, and basically the only thing that's really outstanding is the apprehension of Noriega, because I think you would have to assume that if Noriega goes, then the PDF units that are fighting against the American forces would have no one to fight for anymore, and would have to throw down their arms as well.
As we know, that fighting is still going on with the sky above Panama City lighted up with gunfire. David, we've gone through a period. President Bush had the summit meeting in Yalta, in which he made it very clear to Mikhail Gorbachev that he, President Bush, expected the Soviets to stop supplying arms to particularly El Salvador. Question, in the planning for this, when you talked to military and intelligence sources, did anybody raise as a subsidiary part of the mission, sending a message to Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Cuba, better check your whole cards, because if you think we'll never move militarily in the region, think again?
I haven't heard that, but I mean, certainly that message has got to be coming across. This is a president who, during the campaign, was victimized by the so-called wimp factor, but who in office has shown himself willing to use military force. If you go back and look at some of the incidents that we've had in the past year, beginning with the murder of Lieutenant Colonel Rich Higgins in Lebanon, George Bush was very close to ordering a retaliatory strike against some terrorist strongholds in Lebanon. And in fact, I think he would have had the terrorists gone through with their threat to kill another one of the hostages, Joseph Scipio. Then you had the attempted coup in the Philippines, and George Bush again approved U.S. military intervention. In that case, it was F-4 jets which flew air cover over Manila and kept the rebel Air Force from taking off. Now you have these incidents in Panama, the declaration of war by the Panamanian Parliament, and then the killing of the off-duty Marine officer. And in 2 days, basically, George Bush makes a decision to intervene massively. So I think he has proven that he is a person willing to use military force, probably more so than his predecessor, Ronald Reagan, who, of course, had the image of being the cowboy.
Noting that, of course, George Bush was a combat pilot in World War II, and while President Reagan served during World War II, he served on the continental United States and was not a combat officer. David Martin at the Pentagon, we'll be in touch as time goes along, of course. Now, summing up and reviewing what we know and what we don't know about the U.S. military on the attack in Panama. U.S. troops and armored vehicles have reportedly surrounded the headquarters of General Manuel Noriega in a nighttime attack in Panama. Whether Noriega himself is in the headquarters, unknown. Fires are reported blazing in a number of areas, including around Manuel Noriega's headquarters. Gunfires also reported in other places in and around the capital city. In one case, some 20 miles north of the city, where one of Noriega's elite units, about a 2,000-man battalion, is headquartered. The White House said officially that the operation is aimed at capturing Noriega and bringing him to the United States for prosecution on drug charges. Noriega indicted some time ago in Miami as an international drug operator. Panamanian opposition leader Guillermo Endara has been sworn in and has now been officially recognized by the United States as the leader of the Panamanian government. Now, here's what we believe is going to happen as the morning goes along. That there'll be a briefing at the Pentagon somewhere along the way. Additional information will be coming, of course, out of Panama itself. CBS News correspondent Juan VASQUEZ is on the scene there with a staff of CBS News personnel. This will be an ongoing operation. It is expected to take some hours at least before it is over, but should emphasize no one really knows how long it will go. Our coverage here will continue through the morning. We call your attention especially to the CBS Morning News on many of these CBS stations, followed by CBS This Morning with Harry Smith and Kathleen Sullivan. And, of course, I'll be along with our full CBS News team to bring you up to date during the early morning. Our plan for the moment is to have me pass off to Harry Smith of CBS This Morning to anchor our coverage for the moment here while I pull myself together and get ready for our coverage after the dawn. So, Harry, interesting, dangerous situation. It's always so easy to forget when you talk about military operations. When you look at maps and even look at videotape, that on both sides and all sides, there are mothers, sons, and daughters, fathers and mothers involved in this fighting. And as David Martin is repeatedly pointing out, as has General Werner, that in this kind of operation with this many troops, this much equipment involved, there are bound to be some casualties.
It's certainly a live fire situation down there, and while I'm sure caution has been the watchword throughout all of the planning for this, in a situation like this, certainly as the General mentioned just maybe half an hour or 40 minutes ago, casualties are something that is part of any plan that is taken into consideration like this.
Harry, I'll see you as we go along. Take it away.
All right, Dan. We want to check in with Wyatt Andrews right now, who is at the White House. We understand the president has been up through most of the night and through these early morning hours. Wyatt, what is the latest?
As far as we know, Harry, and that's based on checks just a few moments ago, the president is still in the Oval Office receiving reports on the progress or lack of it. We don't know just yet of the military operation going on down in Panama. The White House is reportedly is trying to make a decision as to whether to put on what in White House parlance is called a lid. And a lid usually indicates that the president has gone home for the night and that the White House intends no more announcements of substance. So if you hear that sort of term of art, if you will, a lid being put on at the White House, that means that the president has gone home, and it's significant that we don't have one at this point. Again, all indications are that all of the crisis management situation room decision-making is still going on at this moment.
If a lid is in fact put on, is there some way we can interpret that, good, bad, indifferent?
No. Absolutely not. It would be just, I think you could interpret that the president felt that, that the situation was in hand enough for him to catch a few hours sleep.
All right, Wyatt Andrews at the White House. Updating, of course, at about 1 o'clock this morning, the White House and Marlin Fitzwater announced that, in fact, U.S. troops were involved in an extrication process involving General Panama's General Manuel Noriega. Juan VASQUEZ is, of course, our correspondent on the scene in Panama City, and we want to check in with him right now. Juan, what do you know?
Harry, for the moment, the people who took over the Marriott Hotel, where a lot of American people usually stay, have left the hotel. We are trying to find out now exactly what happened, but one of the things that we know that happened is that they rounded up a lot of them. When they first came in, they told everybody to hit the ground. They put them down on the ground, aiming rifles at them, and then they separated the Americans from the Panamanians. They said the Americans were hostages. We do not know. We are trying to find out if they took the Americans with them, and if so, how many. At this moment, I don't know. We are trying to find out. As soon as I know, we will get back to you. The people who took over the hotel, the armed men who took over the hotel, they were in masks, they had rifles, they had wearing civilian clothes. We don't know exactly who they were. They have apparently left for the moment.
Can you repeat the chronology on that one more time a second, Juan? What time did this happen? And do you have any notion what squad this might have been, who these people are?
Well, it happened sometime after midnight, and they stayed in the hotel about 3 hours. We actually saw 4 of them before we closed our doors, so they wouldn't come after us. We saw 4 of them. They were armed. They were wearing masks. Harry, I'm trying to find out some more information about that. I'm getting it right now. Just a moment.
Sure. We'll let Juan get briefed by his sources there in Panama, just to give him a second to get his thoughts and ideas together down there. As we heard a little bit earlier, and we'll be able to find out from Juan in a couple of minutes, we hope, there were reports that the skies over Panama City were in fact lit up, that fire was audible and heard around Panama City. It sounds as if some Americans may in fact have been taken hostage in the hotel that Juan VASQUEZ was just reporting from. We also have listening posts in Bogota, Colombia, and we can go back to Juan now for the latest. Juan, go ahead.
We are hearing, Harry, that approximately 16 Americans were taken from the hotel. Earlier I said there were 4 armed men. Now I am being told there were actually about 10, and they rounded up about 16 Americans. It's possible they may have taken a couple of American reporters with them. they told some of the people, some of the Panamanians, that they were taking the Americans for the protection of the Panamanians. In other words, the people who took them said they wanted to protect themselves by having hostages. If you can stand by for just a moment, Harry.
Okay, Juan, we're going to let you get your notes together. In the meantime, we're going to talk with General Frederick Warner. General, if you will, I guess it would be safe to assume that if you were trying to plan some sort of an extrication procedure, that with all the Americans that are in Panama, that would be one of the things you would have to take into consideration, and that would have to be one of the real downsides of an operation like this, real potential hazard.
Very definitely. The extensive American community, maybe 30,000 now in total, is spread throughout Panama. It includes not only the military family members and the employees of the Panama Canal and the United States Embassy, but also a very extensive business community and a retired community in Panama. Though concentrated in the city, there is American presence in the interior of Panama. And one of the most difficult aspects of any operation of this nature is to try to provide as much security as possible to this dispersed American community.
As militarily astute, I guess, as we can assume folks like Noriega and the people who are underneath him probably are, might that have been a part of their plan, their game plan, if in fact they were anticipating an attack or an insurgency like this?
Yes, we could reasonably assume that the Panamanian Defense Forces, knowing that there is no way that they could confront the United States military in terms of military power, would look to alternate measures of providing for their own security or future bargaining position. And certainly they would have considered hostage taking as one of these options.
Thank you, General Warner. I'm sure we're going to get back to you in just a little bit. We want to remind you that we're getting late information from Juan VASQUEZ, our Juan VASQUEZ in Panama City, of some hostages that have been taken from a hotel there. We want to get back to him in a couple of minutes. First, we want to go to Andy Triay, our CBS News producer in Bogota, Colombia, who has been monitoring Colombian radio to find out what you're hearing down there. Andy?
Harry, actually, Mexican television on a newscast we're watching on cable TV here has just run an interview with General Noriega's chief spokesman, Major Lopez Grimaldo. Lopez Grimaldo has just said that Noriega is safe. He's in the countryside, he is not in the city, and he is abreast of the situation. Lopez Grimaldo also went on to emphasize that Panama, in his words, did not declare war on the United States last week. Rather, Noriega, according to Lopez Grimaldo, said that that Panama is in a state of war with the United States. He repeated that several times, saying that Panama did not declare war on the United States. He added one thing, that U.S. tanks are on the periphery of the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters, the quartel. He did not elaborate on that. He was very vague as to where Noriega was and what Noriega was doing, but did say he was safe outside of the city in the countryside.
Andy, just a clue on this, the television report that you're monitoring down there comes from government-controlled Panamanian television?
No, this is a Mexican television newscast we're monitoring on cable in Bogota. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Major Lopez Grimaldo, Noriega's spokesman, called the station, and it was his voice, and he was interviewed by their anchorman when he made these statements.
And if you had to judge the credibility of that sort of an interview just from where you are, how would you rate it 1 to 10?
I would think it's about a 5. I think it was Lopez Grimaldo. He sounded a bit nervous and unnerved, and he was very, very loose on details of where Noriega was. So I think he sounded quite surprised at what was going on, but other than that, I don't know.
Andy Triay and Bogota, we will get back to you in a while as well. We want to go back to our Juan VASQUEZ, who is in Panama City. Juan, bring us back up to date with the information you gave us about the hostage taking a little while ago, and with the latest information you have there, Juan.
What the management of the Marriott Hotel is saying, Harry, is that 30 to 40 armed men occupied the hotel for about 3 hours, and they took, according to them, 16 American hostages, is the word they used. Hotel management said that one of the people indicated to them that these people, the Americans, were being taken to a police station, to the San Francisco, that's the name of a neighborhood in Panama City, to the San Francisco police station. We don't know what has happened to these hostages, and while all the men who took over the hotel had weapons, we heard no shooting at any time in the hotel or in the immediate vicinity of the hotel.
In which hotel is this? Just to repeat, as people are joining us this morning, which hotel is this? Is this the hotel that you're in right now?
That's correct. This is the Marriott Hotel that I'm in right now, and that is the principal hotel used by American visitors to Panama City. It is a hotel that has been used in the past, although not lately, by the U.S. Armed Forces when they have pilots or other people here overnight or perhaps staying for a few days, and they have no room for them in the barracks or in officers' quarters. But as far as we know, there were no American military men in the hotel, and there haven't been for weeks, possibly months.
And Juan, just to repeat, you said you saw some of these people. These were non-uniformed personnel, would you guess, military people, Panamanian military types, maybe some sort of even a secret police squad of some sort? Well, what's your guess?
They were either, I think, members of the so-called dignity brigades, dignity battalions. Those are the shock troops that Noriega formed last year or early this year in reaction to all the difficulties against him. Or they were members of some of the military units. There are at least one large, well-known military unit, which in Spanish is called Machos del Monte, which do not, those soldiers do not customarily wear uniforms. That's one of their designations, is not to wear a military uniform. So it could have been either one. It could also have been policemen.
And these are also the same people that we were so familiar with right after the election down there, the thugs that very famous picture of the then elected Vice President Ford, who was literally beaten in the street. Those are the same folks?
Yes, those were members of the dignity brigades, dignity battalions, who got involved in the confrontation with Billy Ford early last May after the election.
Okay, Juan VASQUEZ, we'll get back in touch with you in just a bit. We want to go back to the White House now, and Wyatt Andrews with the latest from there. Wyatt?
Harry, we have a few more details now about how the president is handling this crisis and what he is doing at this moment. He is back in the Oval Office, according to his spokesman, Marlin Fitzwater, in his study at this point, making calls to allied leaders. Key among those, not exactly an allied leaders, but the president has sent a cable explaining what the United States did to Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. No response on the cable to Gorbachev reported yet. Some other operational details. The president is in that study and in the Oval Office with Mr. Scowcroft, who is the National Security Advisor. Mr. Gates, the Deputy National Security Advisor, is in the Situation Room, and also Mr. Baker, Secretary of State Baker, is in and out of the Oval Office, also making calls to allied leaders. And the White House reports that the allied reaction to this attempt to get Mr. Noriega is generally supported, but the spokesman here added, as a proviso, what would you expect at this point? One of the most interesting things to come out of this sort of mid-crisis update is that Mr. Fitzwater described the mood in the president's study as cautious. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that seems just a little bit different from the near certain guarantee of success that Mr. Fitzwater talked about at his first on-camera briefing when they first announced this military operation. Again, the mood now is cautious. Harry.
Wyatt Andrews at the White House, thanks very much. Just to repeat this morning, United States troops are involved in fighting Panamanian forces in and around Panama City in an effort to extricate General Manuel Noriega, who is the head of that country and, of course, has been indicted in this country on drug charges, a long-time problem for United States government officials. As of this moment, there are no official reports of casualty, although gunfire and flames around Panama City have been reported. We also have reported, as of just a few moments ago, from Juan VASQUEZ, our man in Panama, that some 16 Americans have been taken hostage by Panamanian forces to a Panamanian police station. Their status as of right now is unknown, but as this situation unfolds, we will keep you up to date and break into your regular programming as warranted as this situation unfolds. For Dan Rather and Wyatt Andrews and Juan VASQUEZ and the rest of us here at CBS News This Morning and David Martin at the Pentagon, stay with us here throughout the morning hours, and we'll keep you up to date, and we'll see you in a little while.
This has been a CBS News special report.